All right, so today I'm going to give it a little bit for a couple more people to start, for us to join. But today we're going to be talking about Dr. Ira Philip Davis. Here's a photo of him in his uniform. So we're going to be talking about that today. In the meantime, while people are coming in and joining, if anyone wants to discuss anything in the news, maybe something positive, because I know the majority of it has been very negative. So just give it a little bit longer before we start up. All right. So there was something that I saw earlier today that caused me a great distress. So it seems that the president is going to do his first rally since the pandemic has started. And he has decided that he was going to do it in Tulsa, Oklahoma on June 19th, which is the day that is celebrated as Juneteenth. So that is, to me, absurd. I actually was kind of in disbelief when I heard that, because you know that his supporters and he himself are not greatest advocates for Black lives, no matter how much they pretend to be. So the fact that he is doing, and hi everyone who's joining in, just talking about the president and his decision to do a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Juneteenth. So it is absurd to me, and it seems a little, I don't want to get too angry, too feisty with my words, but it is distressing to me that he would plan out an event in Tulsa on that day. It just seems very on the nose, and it upset me a lot to hear it this morning. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but it is scary. It is a little bit scary to me. Hi Jocelyn, hi Javo. So we have a good amount of people, so I think I'm just gonna get started. Today's gonna be a little bit of a long session, but it's gonna be worth it. I kind of changed up how we're gonna do it today, so I'm kind of gonna give you the profile as best as I can. I'm gonna talk to you about all the things that he did. And the second thing I'm going to do is show you guys the documents and everything that I found about Dr. Ira Philip Davis and his life. And thank you, Ms. Brandon. I don't want to start cursing because this is an educational show, but it is something that is truly, like, I think disgusting is putting it maybe a little bit lightly. It is scary. So, all right, let's get started. So, for those who just joined in, we're talking about Dr. Ira Philip Davis today. This is a photo of him. So, Ira Philip Davis was an incredible community figure, a civic leader, a political activist. He was a dentist, and he was a veteran. And he was a part of various different efforts here in Miami on behalf of the African American community. And he fought for the rights and of these people on so many different ways. And he was successful in the majority of his endeavors. So we're going to get into it. So hi everybody. Thank you for joining me in today. So I'm sorry again, it sucks. So again, talking about Ira Philip Davis. So he was born in Jacksonville, Florida on February 16th, 1896 to an Emma and C.C. Davis. And they were listed as living in Jacksonville, okay? So as a child, it seems that Ira was moved around a little bit because in the 1920 census, which is the next time I was able to track him down, he is listed as living in Orlando as the stepson to Joseph Callier and Emma Callier. So it seems that his mother remarried. I do not know what happened between his mother and original father. Any number of things could have happened. So before the census, he actually was drafted into World War I, and he was one of the men who served and participated in the war. He served in the medical corps, which was most likely what put him on the health track that he followed for the rest of his life. So after the war, he earned an undergrad degree at FAMC, at Florida Agriculture Mechanical College, and then he attended Howard University and graduated with a doctorate of dental surgery degree in 1929. So it seems that between when he graduated and when he moved to Miami in 1936, he owned and operated a drugstore and a dentist office in Orlando. And I could not find evidence of this, unfortunately, but it was reported multiple times that that was something that he did before he came to Miami in 1936. So once he moved down here, he actually owned two dentist offices. One was located at 1036 Northwest 2nd Avenue in Overtown, and the other in Grand Avenue in Coconut Grove. And in 1937, he actually married the daughter of a legendary community figure that we had talked about 2 weeks ago, I believe, on the show, E.W.F. Stirrup. He married Louise Stirrup on June 30th of 1937. So let's get into what he did, all right? So one of the major things that Ira Philip Davis is credited with was being part of the committee that lobbied for the establishment of the Negro Police Force in 1944. This police force, which is now known as the First Five, was comprised of Ralph White, Moody Hall, Clyde Lee, Edward Kimball, and John Millage. They were sworn in by the Director of Security, Dan Rosenfelder, in front of Dr. Ira P. Davis's dentist office. And interestingly, Davis's office actually served as a temporary headquarters for these officers until the Black Police Precinct and the courthouse was constructed in 1950. So in that same vein, he actually was also a crucial piece in installing Lawson Edward Thomas, L.E. Thomas, as the judge for the all-Black municipal court. And when this building finished construction in 1950, he actually also served as a master of ceremonies for that event, and when L.E. Thomas was sworn in by Miami officials. And again, I have articles and everything, and I'm going to show you all of this in a little bit. So Davis, Ira Philip Davis, was actually the first Black to serve as a district commander for the American Legion of the Department of Florida in 1946. So this organization was established in 1919 after World War I, and it was for the veterans, and it's a veteran organization. So he became the first Black district commander of the American Legion. And prior to January 1947, Blacks were actually not allowed in the Orange Bowl. And this is actually continuing the vein of what my colleague was talking about on Monday. So we were talking about Roosevelt and the New Deal and the Public Works Association. And one of the buildings that came from that was actually the Orange Bowl. So this taxpayer-funded, publicly paid facility was not open to Blacks who lived here, even though they were paying their taxes. So Davis actually led the negotiation that led to that change. Davis was also a key member in bringing down the first Orange Blossom Classic in 1947. And here we go. So in 1948, he also served as a director of the Dade County Council of Community Relations, and he was instrumental in the successful campaign to integrate Miami's golf courses. So this was actually resolved in the case of Rice versus Arnold, that finally allowed Black Miami golfers to dismantle the racially discriminatory practices that governed the courses. So before this, Black golfers were actually only allowed to play at the Miami Springs golf course 1 day a week. And the rule was Mondays only, and the reason it was that way was because it was the day that least interfered with business. So the Miami Negro Golf Association handed two city officials a petition with over 3,000 signers asking for regular use of the course. Obviously, it was resolved, and then Blacks were able to use the golf courses, which were also publicly funded and publicly paid. But it wasn't for a lack of fighting. There was a lot of... That's actually a really interesting story if anyone wants to look into it. I have a book, so if anyone's interested for that after, I'll bring it out. But that was a great struggle. So other organizations that he was a part of. He was the chairman of the board of Christian Hospital, and he was actually the chairman of the board that led the move of the Christian Hospital from its original location in Overtown to its last location in Brownsville. He was also the president of the Greater Miami Urban League from 1961 to 1963. So Davis and some members of the community actually asked the National Urban League to come inspect Miami-Dade and do a socioeconomic study. And so this was in the early 40s. And what the study revealed was really already known, because this was a couple years after. It's actually kind of around the same time as when Joseph Comer did his expose with the Miami Herald. So the situation in Overtown, and this is quote, dismal and lacking the bare basics to help make their lives more bearable. Not enough doctors, poor housing, and poor schools. And of course, this is not referring to the educational quality of the teachers because they were astounding. What they're actually talking about is the actual facilities, because there was actually even pipes that were above ground that obviously on hot Miami days, which is every day, these pipes would let the water that these kids were drinking so hot that they might burn themselves. So Davis was also the chairman of the local United Negro College Fund, and he was part of the South Florida Boy Scout Council. He was also part of the Florida Civil Defense of Dade County, and this was actually a group that was put together for the defense of Colortown at the outbreak of World War II. And I know that that's kind of interesting. It seems kind of abstract because the way we talk about World War II in the American context, we never really think of it as being fought on United States soil. But in both in World War I and in World War II, German presence was off the coast of Florida. So even though that seems kind of abstract and nebulous, it was very real at the time. It was a very real concern for the people of Miami to be ready against any German threat. And so another organization that he was a part of was the Community Chest Board, which is now known as the United Way. And maybe I'm showing my age a little bit. I actually really thought the Community Chess Board was a Monopoly piece. I didn't know that it was something that actually existed. So that was something fun that I learned. He was also part of the Beautification Committee for the City of Miami, and he was part of the American Red Cross. He was also a charter member of the Beta Beta Lambda chapter of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and a founding member and first sire archon of the Alpha Rho chapter of the Sigma Pi Phi fraternity. And in the last couple years of his life, he stayed dedicated to working hard, and he was actually a Florida delegate to the DNC, and he served on an advisory committee on older Americans under President Lyndon B. Johnson. So I'm going to get into all that, but now I just want to show you guys all the documents and newspapers that I found about Dr. Ira Philip Davis's life. So we're going to start from the beginning. I'm going to show you all the documents and the years and stuff. So this is the first census record that I find Ira Philip Davis, all right? Let's see if I can hold this a little bit better. So here at the top, you have Davis C.C., and this is originally his father, and Emma J. and Ira Philip Davis. He's listed as being 4 years old in the 1900 census, and his father is a commercial merchant. And the next time that he comes up is in the 1920 census, where you can see him listed as a stepson, which is interesting. So he obviously something happened. They moved from Jacksonville to Orlando, and this is where he lived the first portion of his life. And the next census that I found him in was in the 1940 census, where you see him listed here, married to Louise with his wife and his mother was living with them. And he's listed as a doctor and dentist, and Louise Stirrup was listed as a teacher. So here's another article. So this here is actually his registration papers. This is when he was drafted into World War I. You see Ira Philip Davis, his address in Orlando. His birthday is February, I believe. Yes, February 16th, 1896. He's a college student. And you have down here the date, which is June 14, 1917. So that was the day he was officially drafted. And so you see this article here, which came out actually right after Pearl Harbor happened. So Negroes ready to aid defense. Mobilization to be discussed at meeting Sunday. Negroes in the Miami area will be mobilized for the civilian defense efforts at a meeting Sunday afternoon in St. Paul's Church. So we're going to skip down a little bit. The General Executive Committee includes Dr. Ira Philip Davis, Chairman and District Air Raid Warden, Father J.E. Colmer, Vice Chairman Ellie Thomas, Secretary, H.E.S. Reeves, Francis Tucker, Dr. T.L. Laurie, and Captain James E. Scott. The subcommittee chairmen are as follows: A.H. Mays, Naranja Agriculture, R.C. Gibson, Civil Protection, Ellie Thomas, Finance and Budget, Captain Scott, Food, Ann Coleman, Home and Conservation, Professor S.M. Mosley, Information, Education, and Morale, and Charles Lockhart, Labor and Personnel. So, like I said, it's interesting because I know that when we talk about World War II, especially in the American context, we don't think about it as coming to our soil. But people were very scared, and they were ready, and they were preparing their Miami community in case anything had happened. So let's continue down. So this article is actually when Ellie Thomas was installed as the judge for the Black Municipal Court. So you see the headline here: Experiment in Democracy gets underway in Miami. So we have right here, City Clerk Francis Correll administers the oath of office to Lawson E. Thomas, first judge of Miami's new Negro Police Court, and so at ceremonies attended by city officials. And here you have him passing down his first judgment. So Miami's first Negro judge takes bench. So the first Negro judge in the South since Reconstruction convened court today with a rap of a gavel just presented to him during ceremonies. So he talked about him. He's 52 years old, Lawson E. Thomas, practicing attorney in Miami for many years, and a graduate of University of Michigan Law School. The courtroom in the new Negro Police Precinct and Court Building at Northwest 5th and 11th Street couldn't hold the crowd which turned out for the swearing-in ceremonies. So I'd like to also pay attention to this bolded text right here. This new court will try only police cases involving Negroes. So I'm going to talk about the police next, but even in this context, this court was only for the people of the Central Negro District, and the police officers who were installed could only detain and arrest Black people. They could not do anything to any white people they caught breaking the law. So he will start. Dr. Ira P. Davis, Negro dentist, served as master of ceremonies and introduced the city officials and the prominent members of the Negro community who attended, including clergymen of several denominations. So I'm going to continue down. To the police article. So here we go. So here's actually a photo of the first five. So you have from left to right, Ralph White, Moody Hall, Clyde Lee, Edward Kimball, and John Milledge. So let's read to you from this article here. The five Negro policemen, first in the history of Miami, were to be sworn in at 5:30 p.m. Friday by Dandy Rosenfelder, Director of Security. So the five were appointed to patrol exclusively in the downtown Negro section of the city, and they will work, Rosenfelder said, from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., and they will be paid $173.50 a month, the regular emergency policeman's pay. So I actually also want to read this sentence here by the Lieutenant Tanner, who was their commanding officer, who also trained them. Tanner said he believed that these men will more than pay for themselves when you stop to think. You realize the city puts out several $100s a year in taking care of people from that section in hospitals here. By that I mean they fight and they get cut up and shot and they have to go to a hospital, and that costs the city money. So you can obviously tell that he has the best interest of the community at heart, which is obviously a joke. It's very callous the way he talks about it. But the end result being that these first five police officers were installed, and it was a good thing for the community. And he goes on to say that he's been training these young men and they are good officers. So there's also that. And at the end, it finishes with duties will confine them to the Negro section of the city, and Rosenfelder said they will not be permitted to arrest or restrain any white person. So even though they're cops and they were given a badge, a gun, and everything, they actually didn't even get cars. They had to ride around on bicycles, which is still visible if you go to the Police Precinct Museum in Overtown. So let's continue back. All right. So he was actually, and this is a little bit more fun, a little lighter, he actually was at the Lord Calvert's hotel opening. So he was a master of ceremonies he substituted for Judge Ellie Thomas. And following the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner, the Reverend Edward T. Graham offered the invocation. And it was also listed other community members like Johnny Colmer was there. So this is Lord Calvert opened in 1951. Another thing that, and again, because he was a veteran, this was something that he was intimately tied to. He was always tied into these civilian defense councils, right? So this is another one. This is separate from the one that was opened in 1941. This is in 1950. So let's read this here. Enrollment as a volunteer worker in the Dade County Defense Council may mean the difference between life and death in the event of a disaster. Dr. Ira P. Davis, in charge of the Negro Division of the Council, commented yesterday. Under the direction of Davis, 15 Negro schools in the county will be staffed Friday to enroll these volunteer workers, and the booths will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I'm gonna read at the bottom here. These workers, Dr. Davis said, will be trained so that they will have a better chance of survival in the event of an atomic blast or other disaster, and at the same time will be trained to help others. There is no more important matter before us at the time. It is our duty not only to our community, but to ourselves and our children to enroll in this service Friday. So again, I know that after World War II, a lot of people tend to think the next one was Vietnam, which did happen soon, but we actually had the Korean War in between that. And at the same time, you have to think, why were we fighting these wars? Is because we were fighting against communist influence, right? That was the stated reason. And so the scare, the atomic scare, was very real, and you see it here listed as they were putting together another defense council to make sure the community was well taken care of at the time. Like I told you earlier, he had also was the first, so I'll read here from this. Dr. Ira Davis named Legion executive, and this is in 1946. So appointment of Dr. Ira P. Davis, Miami Negro dentist, as acting district commander of District 11, composed of all Legion posts in the state with exclusively Negro membership, was announced today by H. Frost Bailey, state commander of the American Legion. Dr. Davis immediately called to a district meeting to be held in Orlando on August 7th and 8th to perfect district organization. This meeting will follow one set for August 5th and 6th, when the colored veteran of the World War will vote on dissolution, and all members of this organization will automatically be admitted into the Legion as members of various Negro posts in District 11. So you also have this veterans organization integrating before the Army does. I believe the last armed forces to integrate was in 1952 under Truman. So it's great to see that these veteran organizations are actually doing the work and being more forward-thinking and progressive than the Army is. So like I told you earlier, he was also the chairman of the board for Christian Hospital when it was moving from its original location in Overtown to its second location in Brownsville. So planning funds drive to build a modern hospital here for Negroes are from left to right: Carl T. Hoffman, an attorney, municipal judge Ellie Thomas, Leo Robinson, a banker, and Dr. Ira P. Davis, chairman of the funds drive. They announced their plans at a dinner meeting at the Carver Hotel. And this is from the same article. So leader plans new hospital for Negroes. A plan to raise money to construct a modern 50-bed hospital to care for the needs of 75,000 Negroes in the Miami area was put into effect today. The move followed a dinner meeting last night at which the white and Negro leaders in the community spoke of the urgent need for expansion and remodeling of Christian Hospital at 1218 Northwest First Place. The present wooden structure has been termed a fire hazard and is also badly overcrowded. So Dr. Ira P. Davis, leader of the Negro community, said the campaign will have a goal of $250,000 once the money is raised. The Albert Pick Foundation will give an additional $75,000, and federal funds is expected to bring the total to $500,000. Judge Ellie Thomas said the hospital will fill a definite need for Negroes in the area. So this was in 1954, and the hospital almost finishes construction here in 1959. So one of the most modern hospitals in the country for Negro patients is almost a reality in Dade County. In the Cornerstone Lane ceremonies, James C. Evans, civilian assistant to the United States Department of Defense, praised the efforts of Dr. Ira Philip Davis, chairman of the Board of Trustees for the new Christian Memorial Hospital on Northwest 32nd and 47th Street. The walls and roof of the 50-bed hospital have been completed, and the finishing touches on the $350,000 structure are now being added. So if you know, there's actually a difference between the final, what they expected the fund amount to be and what the final amount was. The good thing is that they got the hospital constructed anyway. And so here, this article here, this is just to show you that he was the leader, that he was the president of the Greater Miami Urban League in the 60s. So this is actually about Daniel Lang resigning as the executive secretary, but at the bottom it has, he had been with the league for the past 7 years. Dr. Ira P. Davis, president, said a replacement will probably be named in 2 to 3 months. So it's another interesting little piece of evidence. So another group that Dr. Ira Davis was part of was actually board of the Florida region of the National Conference of Christian Jews. And he received a citation, which it seems like it was a bad thing, but it actually I think was an honor because they discussed it in a newspaper article that I found. And so I also want to pay attention to this article here, which is Negro Junior College Policy Under Fire. So the Dade School Board 5-man Negro Junior College Advisory Board dwindled yesterday to 1 sure member. 2 Negro citizens chosen were undecided and 2 declined to serve. The development followed a blast from the Reverend Theodore T. Gibson, president of the NAACP here, who scored the proposed Negro College as a creation of a new pattern of segregation. Judge Ellie Thomas, last to announce his decision, said yesterday, "I find myself in total disagreement with a program which would increase the amount of segregated facilities we already have. It would be dishonest to sit on such a board knowing that I was not in sympathy with the job it was trying to perform." So I'm going to skip a little bit. The other 3 were officially appointed to the advisory board last week after school board members said they had agreed to serve. They are Marshall Williamson of South Miami, Arthur Mays of Goulds, and Dr. Ira P. Davis of Coconut Grove. So Dr. Ira P. Davis was actually, he said he was not invited in any official capacity, and he said he was not in a position to make any statement, and he said he would not make a decision until he's officially approached. But I want to show you this last part here. So Gibson, in a statement issued the day, an advisory board for a white junior college has been in existence for several months. Gibson, in a statement issued to the day and the school board made the appointments, questioned the board's good faith. He pointed out the board has argued in court that the Dade public schools are not racially segregated. So this was in 1959, just a couple years prior to the civil rights movement of the 60s. Okay? And I actually do want to talk about this for a second, because I know that nowadays when people talk about politics, some people have blinders on, and they'll say that, well, I don't know if racism exists because there's no overt racism codified into law. Sure. But you see what that article was doing? You see how this white board, this Negro Junior College policy board was put together, and they tried to put community leaders to give it more credence. But at the same time, all it was going to do was, at the end of the day, create another segregated facility, not integrate. It was going to create another facility, another separate but equal facility. It wouldn't result in any real change. So I commend these men for recognizing that and fighting against it, because that is what the difference is. That is what comes into law. That is what it is now. It's subtle. It's not overt. It's not something that is said like, no, black people are not allowed here. It's subtle, saying, no, this is an advisory board to create a new college. But the end result is the same. So again, I commend these men for recognizing that and fighting against it. And there's another situation where Dr. Ira Davis comes up and fighting against something like this too. So he was one of the few men who actually was able to get an FHA home loan at the time of redlining, okay? So he was able to build his second house in Coconut Grove. But there is a woman whose name was Frances Tucker, who's, if you look her up on the Black Archives website, we have some of her records. And she gives a testimonial about how difficult it was for her to get that same home loan, even though she was just as qualified. And so the end result of that is that you have newspaper articles coming out and white people protesting in Coconut Grove against zoning restrictions. So again, this just relates back to what I'm saying. This is not like, people talk about overt racism and it not existing anymore. It's very subtle, and it's done with coding and zoning laws. And these are the things that they actually use to keep her from being able to get that home loan and moving into the house that she wanted to construct in Coconut Grove. Go figure. So I'll continue with some more articles. So we have here the World War veterans leaders. So we have a photo of Dr. Ira Philip Davis, a little bit younger. The 5th Annual State Convention of the World War Veterans on August 5th in Tallahassee. And this article here shows him as the vice chairman of the Orange Blossom Classic Committee. So again, this was to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, since the first one was in 1947. And so let me just read to you from this final article here on his death when he was 74. So services for Ira Philip Davis, a Miami dentist and Negro civic leader since 1936, will be held at 2 p.m. at St. Agnes Episcopal Church. Dr. Davis, 74, died of a heart attack Friday in Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. His first public appointment, made shortly after his arrival in Miami from Jacksonville, was as vice chairman of the city's slum clearance committee. His last, in 1965, was the membership of the Urban Renewal Agency. In the 4 decades between the two, Dr. Davis devoted himself to the South and had chosen over the hustle and bustle he had experienced in the North while studying dental surgery at Howard University and interning at Freedman's Hospital in Washington. His undergraduate work was done at Florida A&M. He married a Miami girl, Louise Stirrup, a daughter of pioneer businessman and real estate developer in Coconut Grove. They were the first Negroes to get an FHA loan for a home 11 years ago, and they built a second home in the Grove at 3351 Hibiscus Street. In 1950, Dr. Davis was a strong backer of a newly established Negro municipal court, which operated in a thickly populated Negro area. Dr. Davis's theory was that a Negro judge was more capable of judging a Negro lawbreaker. White judges are inclined to leniency because they feel Negroes are irresponsible, he said in an agreement with Reverend John E. Colmer. Life has been very cheap out here, Dr. Davis added. When the judge starts cracking down on boys carrying switchblade knives and guns and the people learn is going to go hard with them when they are caught, then major crimes will drop too. So we can have a conversation about that language and kind of we have to analyze people as a product of the time and what conditions they were facing, because it's not something that you would hear today. But we'll continue. So in 1958, Dr. Davis served as chairman of the board of Christian Hospital, a new 50-bed institution staffed by white and Negro and professional people that replaced a 12-bed hospital in the city's central Negro district. The same year, he was cited by the National Conference of Christian and Jews for his work on the board of the Florida region. And Dr. Davis was a member of the Selective Service Advisory Board for 20 years, and he served on the USO board for World War II. Dr. Davis, a native of Jacksonville, began his career by owning and operating the drugstore there in 1930, and at the same time, he established a dental practice in Orlando. A veteran of the Medical Corps during World War I, he was the first Negro District Commander of the American Legion Department of Florida in 1946, receiving a plaque for his work. Dr. Davis has served as St. Agnes Episcopal as a senior warden for 15 years, and talks about his surviving family after that. So he really was an incredible community figure and an incredible leader. There's actually one more thing I want to show you guys before I finish up today. Thank you for staying on with me and looking through all these documents. I know it might not be the most exciting thing, but I know it's worth it to look at them. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was 2 weeks ago we had covered E.W.F. Stirrup as a legendary community figure in Coconut Grove, the man who developed it pretty much. And when Ira Philip Davis came to Miami, he married Louise Stirrup, his daughter. And so Louise was a school teacher. And one of the students that she had in her class who went on to make a difference in our Miami community was actually Reverend Theodore Gibson, who I just said was the leader of the NAACP. So it's just cool to see little connections like that. And I have an article here that has Reverend Gibson's first inspiration. And it talks about when he graduated from Booker T in 1934. And he talks about his teacher, Miss Louise B. Stirrup Davis. She was my homeroom teacher and later my history teacher. So this is a man who was a part of he was part of the local chapter of the NAACP, and he was a local leader at a time during the civil rights. And she had actually taught him, and he was married to Ira Philip Davis. And it's just cool to see all these community figures and how they kind of intersect and how their histories align, So that pretty much. I know, Jocelyn, it's pretty exciting. So that pretty much covers Ira P. Davis's life. He was an incredible man. He fought for so much. Literally, since he arrived in Miami, he did not stop fighting for the advancement of the colored people here. And it really is incredible how much he achieved. And he seems like such a humble man. Again, this is for the people who are still here. This is the photo of him. So I hope you guys liked today's presentation. I know I changed it up a little bit. I know I tried to talk and show some documents. I figured that it might be best just to show all the documents from the get-go. And so thank you, Ms. Braden. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jocelyn. So remember that tomorrow we have a virtual field trip with the director, Timothy Barber. On Saturday, we have Storytime in Color with Camila Pritchett. And tomorrow night, if you have any talent, or if you know anyone who does, we're going to be competing on the Lyric Live from the Living Room edition, which is going to happen on the other page, which I'll type the handle down here. So if you want to watch that, that is going to be at that handle tomorrow. If there's any questions on Ira Philip Davis or any of the things that I've talked about today, I would love to answer them because, again, we have all these documents here. But, yeah. I appreciate everyone who joined in late. Thank you for coming in. And since it doesn't look like I'm going to get any questions, I'm going to cut it here. Remember to stay safe, everybody. Coronavirus is still out there. If you're protesting, stay safe. If you are doing whatever you're doing, just make sure you're doing it safely. All right. So I will see you guys next week. I appreciate you. Thank you for joining me again for another edition of Legacies, Profiles, and Greatness. And I will see you guys.